Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Sports Guru 716 and I hope you enjoy today's episode. Today I'm going to talk about the first week of the NASCAR season. I'm going to talk about the news today that came out about Stewart-Haas racing, my opinions on the charter system, because the entry list for this week just came out for the Cup Series, Xfinity, and Craftsman Truck Series, well, Camping World Truck Series, and also obviously talk about the Daytona 500 and what an utter disappointment that was for me. But first, I'm going to talk about Stewart-Haas Racing announcing today that they will be going to Ford next year, which is monumental in my opinion because they had a huge alliance with Hendrick Motorsports, which pretty much caused there to be an 8-team ownership group between Hendrick, Tony Stewart, and Gene Haas. Although unwritten, it was quite obvious. And you see a team that has won 2 out of the last 5 championships coming to Ford, who hasn't won a championship since 2004. I have to imagine a lot of money was put into it because you see the global marketing promotions executive from Ford come out and say, we don't do NASCAR to lose. And I think when they saw Toyota win a championship last year and then they just won the Daytona 500, Ford got a little scared and a little upset that they can't get a championship. So they have Penske, they have Roush, they have Richard Petty Motorsports, and now Stewart-Haas Racing as their main teams. And I have to imagine, due to this, Richard Petty Motorsports is probably going to leave. I know they've been talking for a while with Chevy or Toyota, determining whether they wanted to move over or not, and I think now because of this they're more than likely going to move to Chevy, only because I don't think they want to be the 4th team in the pecking order behind Stewart-Haas, Penske, and Roush. This helps Roush out a lot because Roush provides the engines for everybody, and maybe Roush can finally get a little support from Stewart-Haas, whereas they don't really get that from Penske from what it seems, because Penske's doing a lot better than Roush does. Roush hasn't really done well last season. At the restrictor plate track this week at Daytona, they did okay, but it was nowhere near as good as what the Toyotas were putting out this week. But back to the point at hand. What's interesting, Tony Stewart always drove GM, drove Toyotas for 1 or 2 seasons, and then went back to Chevy. And he's retiring, and just as he retires, Stewart-Haas goes to Ford. Still owns the team, but it goes to Ford. And he's never driven a Ford in Cup, and I don't think he ever will. And it's just interesting to see that. I heard that their logo kind of has homage to the Chevrolet logo, so they're going to have to consider changing their logo and doing a lot of different things. I think that's the least of their worries is their logo by comparison to the technical disadvantage I think they have without being with Hendrick anymore. I think that all of a sudden they're going to have to team with Penske to be able to get things done, and Keselowski's going to have to get along with Harvick, and it'll be interesting to see that because I don't think they really get along, and that'll be interesting to see. I think that they will still be able to compete. I'm not sure why. Money must have been the reason, because why else would you do it? That is a bold move, and that's a move that nobody saw coming, and it's a thing. It changes the landscape of NASCAR going into 2017. All of a sudden, is Stewart-Haas a Cup contender with Ford instead of Chevrolet, who has been dominating the series over the last 10 years with Hendrick Motorsports, Stewart-Haas, and even Richard Childress Racing. So this is very, very interesting, and I really can't wait to see it as a guy that is pro Ford. I really am going to be interested in seeing what happens with that. So with the next topic I wanted to discuss in this video, I think we need to kind of talk about the charter system, because last week I wanted to make a video about the charter system and didn't, because I didn't really think I could talk about it for 10 minutes and not get too angry. I think it's a very, very, very bad idea. Now, the reason why all the owners agreed to it is because all the owners that agreed had charters. Not an owner that didn't have a charter said, yeah, fine, I shouldn't get a chance to start every race, and shouldn't be able to um, not have to really qualify well to make the race. I think the top 43 cars, or the top 40 cars now, every week, should be the ones in the race, regardless of where they are in the standings. If Jimmy Johnson posts a crap lap, he shouldn't be allowed in the race. This is qualifying. You're supposed to put down a good lap to make the race. And to tell me that now these 30 teams are the only 30, or the 36 teams, are the only 36 teams that get these charters every week to make the races bogus. Because what about the guys like Chris Buescher, Ty Dillon, drivers coming up in the sport that all of a sudden Richard Childress Racing and Roush Fenway are like, oh crap, if we open up this fourth car, it's not going to have a charter. There's no guarantee it makes races. How do you sell that to a sponsor? How do you tell a sponsor, hey, I want you to sponsor Chris Buescher, but when you do that, he is a championship caliber driver from the Xfinity Series. It's just, I don't know if he'll make every race. It's a possibility he doesn't, and I understand he might be good enough to make every race, but if he puts down the shit lap, he doesn't get to be in the race. Now, the sponsor's going to look at that and be like, wait a minute, so you're telling me this guy's not guaranteed to make every race? And it's like, no. And it's like, obviously you're not going to tell somebody literally, oh, well, I don't think my driver's good enough to make every race. What if he gets into an accident or something? A big-time sponsor is going to look at him and be like, wow, I don't want to be on, sponsor a guy that I can't rely on showing my product every week, week in, week out, and pay the entry fees to get him in that race or pay to have the decals put on the car. Like, that's ridiculous. I think that that should be the top 43 cars or top 40 cars. It used to be 43. It's 40 now. I feel like it should be 43 again. And if you have that many cars, you have that many cars. And if you don't, you don't. And I think you're seeing the ramifications of the charter system backfiring this week at Atlanta. 39 cars on the entry list. I remember a couple years ago, I started seeing it in the Xfinity Series, and I was just like, oh no. Is this the start of the end of that series? It's going to be like trucks where there's only 32 cars in it, and it's just not going to be very entertaining to watch. There's only going to be some teams in there. There's not going to be a lot of little guys, and that's what's happening. The Cup teams just screwed the little guys. Like, say if Joe Schmo wants to go qualify for a race, he's going to have a real tough time trying to make that race. And it's like, so Joe Schmo that wants to go full time, he has to race all 3 years, and then there's still no guarantee that he gets a charter. But these guys who raced, as long as you race 3 years, you automatically get a charter. Why do they automatically get a charter, whereas a guy that starts tomorrow can't race 3 years, do better than that car, and be guaranteed their charter? I would understand if you had a relegation system every week. Well, not every week, but every season, that kind of like the top 35, where if you finish the top 30 in points, your charter is protected in owner's points. However, if your car finished below somebody else that didn't have a charter, you lose that charter. I would agree with that. I would agree with that relegation system. Say if the 98 from Premium Motorsports finishes 35th in owner's points, and you have a car like, I don't know, say Reed Sorensen's in a car, and Reed Sorensen finishes 31st in points, he should get that charter. His team did better than theirs. He shouldn't have to race 3 years in a row to get that charter. That's not right. That other team's worse. I believe that's wrong. I believe the charter system is screwing the little guy, and not only screwing the little guy, it's disinteresting the little guy. The little guy is not going to want to try and race NASCAR, and nobody's going to want to go full-time in NASCAR because there's no guarantee that in 3 years they get the charter. And that's ridiculous. They should be guaranteed a position. If you want to do 3 years instead of 1 year, and you want to culminate all the owners' points, at least that's meeting in the middle. And then if Reed Sorensen's better than Cole Witt for those 3 years in their respective cars, then Reed Sorensen gets Cole Witt's charter. That's fine. That is completely fine. It's moderate. I would prefer every year because a team can do good one year and bad the next, and it's just I don't think it's right. I think that a lot of teams are going to have trouble funding a car 3 years and being able to tell sponsors with no guarantee that they're going to make every race and that they can get their product out there for everybody to see at the racetrack. So I don't really like that. I'm really not a fan of this charter system. I think that it's causing, already you can see it this week at Atlanta with 39 entry list positions, that now everybody's guaranteed to make the race. There's no qualifying this week, frankly. Who's going to miss the race? Nobody. Qualifying just became a waste of time. It's just set the field, but at the same time, you've got 39 cars. You could do that in practice. You've got 39 cars. Nobody's missing the race. Instead of having a system where you encourage better teams, you have now created a system where it's discouraging future ownership and new owners from entering the sport, and I think that is a mistake. The owners that are in there have made a very selfish decision, and I can't blame them for saving their own ass, but it's a selfish decision, and it hurts their sport. I think NASCAR hurt itself more than it helped itself by allowing this charter system to be put into place. And ironically enough, the guy that was at the head of it, Rob Kaufman, is the guy that was selling his owner point charters. And he has no team to have to worry about making these charters or trying to make these races. And big deal, Daytona had 43 or 48 cars trying to make the race. It was Daytona. You have 36 races a season. This week you're at Atlanta, a track where not as many people want to go to, and there's 39 cars. Wait till Pocono, New Hampshire. Places like that where you know you're already getting low entry list spots, I bet you only get 36, 37. 37 cars. After being a sport that used to be able to have 43 every week, you're now down to 36, 37 cars at Pocono. And I don't care whether that's because it's low purse or that. And I've read that the purses are, they're not going to announce the purses, and I understand that. I think that was kind of weird in the first place, telling everybody how much everybody won. But I believe I read something that non-chartered teams get screwed out of some money. They don't get as much money as everybody else because they aren't chartered. So you're screwing them that way too? If they're better than a chartered team, they don't get that money? The best team should get the money. If you win the race, you should get the money for winning the race. You shouldn't get less money because, oh, well, you're not chartered. You're not in our charter. You won the race, but you get less than 5th place or 10th place because you're not chartered. That's wrong. That is beyond wrong. I believe it is disgusting for the sport to go this route, and I believe NASCAR has hurt itself more than it's helped itself with the charter system, and this is why I didn't talk about it last week. As you can tell, I just ranted for 10 minutes about it, so comment down below your opinion of the charter system if you've gotten this far. And with my last part of this video, I want to cover the Daytona 500. As I said at the beginning of the video, I believe it was a disappointment. The reason why I think it's a disappointment is that although I am a pro Ford guy, and I'm going to try and be as neutral as possible, that race was boring. Besides the last lap, that race was boring. I understand a lot of outside fans look at NASCAR and they're like, well, NASCAR is boring. It's all left turns. No, that race was by far boring to watch. Like, the passing wasn't there. Literally everybody was racing. Just bottom lane, and the top lane couldn't get going. Like, there was no competition. The Toyotas got up front with the Gibbs cars, got up front and never relinquished it. And what's crazy about that is it's because there's no passing. And people are like, well, they had 4 or 5 cars all hooked up. That doesn't mean the top lane can't get 10 cars hooked up to go. They couldn't go. They couldn't get going. They couldn't overcome the bottom lane. And NASCAR's got to figure out what they've got to do to help passing, because at restrictor plate tracks, because that was frankly boring until the last lap. And the last lap happened because Kevin Harvick was able to push Denny Hamlin, and Denny Hamlin was able to finally get the boost in the top lane. He was obviously one of the Gibbs Toyotas, and it's kind of funny because last week in my Gibbs preview I had said that Hamlin was the fourth best driver out of the 4 Gibbs cars, and he's the one with the win. I'll still stand by that, but he got by Kenseth and won the race, and it was one of the closest finishes in NASCAR history between him and Truex, who I was rooting for to win at that point, because Truex, even though he was in a Toyota, Furniture Row moved over there in the offseason, I still that would have been cool. That would have been cool for the guy. He deserves it. But Hamlin wins it, and the Fords just weren't there. They were okay. Blaney was able to stay in the top 10 most of the race. Logano was able to stay in the top 10 most of the race. Those Penske cars have the Penske abilities. Greg Biffle showed up in the top 10 every once in a while. The other 2 Roush cars didn't do jack because Stenhouse and Bain are not very good. But overall, I think the race was a snooze fest, and I'm not a guy that's like, oh, pro accidents, because I'm not. I don't want somebody to get hurt. I don't want people to waste money at a demolition derby, but at the same time, I want some passing. I want a race. I don't want, oh, well, let's all just race 5 in the line here, and nobody's going to be able to pass us because the top lane can't get going. It's like, well, NASCAR's got to figure that out. They got to get the top lane going. Figure it out. They've got it. They change the rule package all the time, and I think they've got to figure out how to change the rules package at restrictor plate tracks to allow more passing and, a closer, more competitive race throughout the race. So, going into Atlanta, I believe it's going to be between it's probably going to be between, just like last year, a Gibbs Toyota, a Hendrick or Haas Chevy, and a Penske Ford. And don't know which guy that's going to be out of all those cars, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be one of those drivers, one of those 15 drivers. And, so I'll probably watch most of the race this week. Hopefully I'll watch all of it. I'm no guarantees there. If it's as boring as the Daytona 500, I may only watch the last 50 laps. So hopefully there's some passing, and hopefully there's some racing instead of hopefully it's not a snooze fest like last week. So, yeah. Alright, so that should be the end of my video. That closes it out. Thank you for watching. This is my first, I don't even know what I'm going to call it, series where I talk about NASCAR. I'm going to probably talk about them every Wednesday. I'll just keep it simple. Every Wednesday I'm going to upload a video about NASCAR. I don't know how long it's going to be. Probably not 20 minutes long like this one ended up being, because I'm not going to talk about the charter system every week. Maybe I will when I look at the entry list. But thank you for watching. Like if you like the video. Subscribe if you want to know future content and know when I upload. I upload kind of random, depending on, well, random in terms of what time of day. I'll try and upload every day. And yeah, so thank you for watching, and I hope to see you here again soon.